This is You're Probably Right. Entertainment first, everything else is just bonus. Opinions, all ours. Sometimes backed by research, but never the final word. There are always exceptions, so take it with a grain of salt and a slight dusting of chili powder. If something in this episode resonates with you or you want to reach out directly, you can email the show at yprpodcast@gmail.com. You can also find the podcast on Facebook. Just search You're Probably Right podcast and the page should come up. And if you are listening somewhere other than Spotify, you can find the show there as well. Just search You're Probably Right and follow the podcast so new episodes show up automatically. All right, let's get into it.
Hey, what's up, y'all? This is MCM, and you are listening to You're Probably Right podcast. This is episode 321. They knew before I did. A lot of people think the next step after distance is reunion. Everybody thinks of the Disney type ending, the wonderful, and they ride off into the sunset or drive off into the sunset, kind of like, who knows what will happen to our wonderful couple. Anyways, guys, as I said before, this is You're Probably Right podcast. Welcome to my first time listeners, my regular listeners, my fair weather friends, and everybody else. Happy that you're here. Remember, each podcast episode is for entertainment purposes only. I do not purposely try to offend. And if I do, then understand it is what it is. It's just words. But I don't throw words, if you understand what that means. For my culture, we understand. So hopefully you can check it out. Just messing with you. But listen, thanks for being here. Can you follow the show? Can you pass it on to somebody else? I would really appreciate it. Also, I've been making clips on YouTube. You should check them out. Some of them are pretty good. Some of them take a long time, though. It's kind of funny. They're only like a minute and a half, but you can get so intricate with them with like effects and all kinds of stuff to really bring home your message or whatever it is. So I did a few of them based on just one episode last week, and it was pretty interesting. Anyhow, here we go. Just remember, it's just me and you hanging out. I know there's a lot of podcasts that have video, but I like the old school type of podcast. I was hoping one day when I was a kid that I would be a radio show host or something like that. And actually, I kind of prefer this. The only thing is I don't get to play music and tell you what the weather is or something like that. But this is actually pretty cool. As you know, I'm 321 in. Actually, it's more, but officially 321 because I don't count the part twos and stuff like that as single episodes, although they are. But I'm just trying to do my thing. Anyhow, here we go. As I said before, a lot of people think the next step after distance is reunion or regret, or at least some kind of reach back. Oh, they'll be sorry they left me. It doesn't always work that way. Back in the day, we used to grow up and think that somehow there'd be a full circle moment and people, believe in what goes around comes around and all that other stuff. And I know a few stories personally that there was no come back around. The best example I can think of is my sister. And I've talked about her at length on other episodes, but it's not always going to be a bed of roses at the end. It might just be a bed. Just remember that. And I'm not trying to be the brain on your parade dude, but I don't want to lie to you either. This podcast isn't about lying. If it does nothing else, it's not going to make me famous. I know that. And it's not going to make me a lot of money. I don't think it's going to do that. It hasn't done it so far. And I'm sure I could have gone down certain channels to do something along that line. And I'm not saying I don't want to. I do have Buy Me a Coffee on this, on my Spotify. So you can always do that if you feel like it. If I've ever helped you, or if anything I've ever said that has really spoken to you and you think it's worth your time or your money, then please do. I appreciate it. But I try to be different, and I'm not trying to be like groundbreaking, like nobody's ever said these words before in essence, but I'm just keeping it straight up. I'm just talking to you like you're my best friend. We're hanging out. I want the best for you, and I don't want to see anything bad happen to you, but at the same time, I want to give you a real picture of what's happening and what's out there as best I can. We just stand on top of giants' shoulders, and one day somebody's going to stand on top of mine, and we go on until the Lord comes. Remember, this is not a Christian podcast. This is just a podcast by a Christian. I'm just a guy. Sometimes and most times, I'm just telling you what I think, what I've seen, what I know, what I've learned, what I've researched, what I've experienced. You know what I mean? So, again, it's just us. If you're taking the dog for a walk, cool. If you're trying to fall asleep and you need somebody boring to listen to, might be me. Or if you're just washing dishes or doing stuff around the house or working and you can concentrate on what you're doing, then please, long drive, whatever. Just imagine me sitting beside you. We're just hanging out. And if you got a good speaker system, and I try to do my best radio voice. No, it comes and goes, guys. You should, some of the episodes, my voice is so high and some are so low. Anyhow, I don't know why. I like to, because it's just me and I'm just riffing most of the time, and I do have scripts and stuff like that. And obviously, I go off script a lot. And obviously, you can tell that this is not AI, and hopefully that is refreshing for a lot of you. I did try. I can honestly tell you, I did try, I think, one or two episodes, early hundreds or late hundreds. I can't remember. And it was just kind of lame, but it wasn't that long. I just wanted to see if I could make a script and if I could record my voice and see how it would go. And it's just not authentic. So again, if I help 5 people and it does something different in your life in a positive way because of listening to my podcast, then I've done my work.
If this sounds familiar, follow the show so this kind of thinking stays close.
So anyways, you would like at least a reach back or something, like if something mattered enough, if it really got under both people's skin, then surely somebody comes back around. Surely somebody checks in. Surely somebody says, hey, I know this got messy, but I've been thinking about you. You expect some kind of return current, some sign that what happened didn't just disappear the second the contact stopped. And I think that that's what makes this kind of pain so hard to explain. And just stay with me. If you're not really sure where the heck I'm going, just stay with me. I'm trying to keep the soundproofing good, but this thing is really bothering me, so just hang on. I got one of those big foam things that kind of go around the microphone, and it's just hampering me. And I don't use a teleprompter. I'm just here with my notes and stuff like that. So it's a little bit whatever. So hopefully the sound is still good. It might have changed just a little bit, but hopefully not too much. Maybe it's bouncing off the window, because if you want to know, I sit right in front of a window, beautiful sky in front of me, and that's how I like to do it. Anyhow, you see, sometimes the next steps is not a reunion. It's not regret. It isn't pursuit. It isn't even closure. Sometimes the next step, and this is after a breakup, of course, or not really a breakup, just kind of a withering away because of whatever, right? Sometimes the next step is just silence. And not peaceful silence. Not the kind where two people quietly move on and make their peace with things. I mean, the kind of silence that starts doing damage. The kind that gets louder the longer it goes on. The kind that slowly forces you to realize nobody is coming back to check what this did to you. Nobody is coming to explain it. Nobody is coming to help you carry it. Nobody is even coming to confirm that it mattered in the way that it mattered to you. And that kind of silence can mess with a person in a really deep way. Because now it's not just that the connection ended. You're tied, you're really caught up, you know? And unfortunately, it was just you that was caught up. Because at the end of the day, the connection just ended. Now you're left sitting there with the other realization. And honestly, I think this is the one that really breaks people. The other person may have understood what was happening before you did. They may have seen the attachment forming before you had the words for it. They may have known how much this was starting to mean to you while you were still trying to play it cool, still trying to tell yourself it was just closeness or chemistry or timing or whatever safer name you want to give it, and whatever gives you ease. And that's the part that can eat you alive. Not just the ending, not just that they left, but that they may have seen your heart moving towards them before you fully admitted it to yourself, even, and still let you keep going. I think that's one of the most devastating things a person can actually realize. That the other person may have looked at the whole thing. They were able to step back and look at the whole thing more clearly than you did the entire time. That while you were still inside, still making meaning of it, still hoping it was becoming something real and lasting, they may have already known exactly where it stopped and how far you guys were going to go for whatever reason. Exactly what it was to them, exactly what it was never going to be. And they said nothing. They let the moments keep happening, whatever those were. They let the closeness keep building, the connection, finding new strands to connect to. They let you fall into something they may never have been inside in the same way, but they were inside. And that's the wound. And I don't think people always know how to name that wound, which is why it ends up living in the body in all these strange ways. You get more reactive, more restless, more withdrawn, more obsessive, more tired, more ashamed. You're short with people who have nothing to do with it. You're distracted. You're carrying this weird grief and humiliation and anger all at once. And nobody around you fully gets it because they don't know the full story. They just see that something is off with you. But they don't know you're trapped inside. They don't know you've been carrying this private collapse around like a prison. And maybe that's why I wanted to talk about this in this way. I'm talking about this today because not like a theory, not like a lesson, more like more like the thing a person finally says when they've been holding it in for too long and it's been tearing them up inside. Because maybe the deepest pain here isn't just losing the connection. Maybe it's realizing the other person saw the truth before you did. Maybe they knew you were falling before you fully knew it yourself, and they still let you hit the ground. I think one of the hardest things to admit is that sometimes what felt deep was being held up by closeness, not necessarily by commitment. I know that sounds like I'm trying to reduce it. I'm not. I'm trying to explain why it can feel so real while it is happening and then feel almost impossible to understand once it's gone. Because proximity does a lot to people. Seeing someone all the time does something to your nervous system. Sharing routines does something. Being in the same environment, the same rhythm, the same little repeated pockets of time, that starts creating emotional weight, whether you mean for it to do that or not. A person can become important to your inner life just because they keep showing up in it. Not in a shallow way, in a real way. Repetition builds familiarity, and familiarity starts to feel like significance. Even if it's not, it feels like it because it's something, it's part of your life. And that's just simply human. You know, every day that your mailman's going to come and, his name's Jonathan because you learned that one day when he got snagged or he dropped his name tag or whatever the case is. And you started saying, "Hey, Jonathan." And he's your mailman for 15 years. You know what I mean? One day Jonathan stops coming and it's not like you can, contact the mail people and say, "What happened to Jonathan?" You know what I mean? And that's just a simple, just I see this person every day. Maybe it's somebody who walks their dog who lives on your street, and one day they're just gone. You just assume they moved. But the point is, while they're there, you expect to see them. You know what I mean? And that's just obviously the far off, not that important, but think about somebody who you're actually in a relationship or some kind of a situationship or something where you're actually agreeing to spend time with each other. If somebody became or becomes part of your daily atmosphere, as I was saying, part of your routine, part of those little moments that break up the day or soften it or give it something to look forward to, they stop feeling like a random person. They start feeling like part of your life. And once that happens, it gets very easy to believe the connection is deeper than it actually is. Not because you're stupid, not because you're desperate, because the setting starts doing something of emotional work, I guess, on you. The routine carries some bond, the access carries some of the intensity. The repeated contact keeps feeding the feeling. There's always another moment, another conversation, another little look, another private exchange, another reminder that this person is somehow woven into your world. And I only brought up Jonathan, the mailman, just for like obviously just an example. But it might not have been anything anywhere near close to 15 years. It might have been 3 weeks. Well, maybe not 3 weeks, maybe 3 months, 6 months, a year. And when this keeps happening day to day, you keep asking yourself whether the connection can survive outside the structure that keeps producing it. It's just something that's just a part of your day, part of your life, part of your week, part of your month. And that's where people get hurt because sometimes two people feel incredibly close inside a certain setting. Maybe it's work, maybe you're at the same university, maybe it's travel, maybe you're always on the same plane together, going to the same place, and you decided to get into some sort of a relationship. So you always, whether you're angry, happy, or sad, you will see this person every day. Maybe it's a shared project that you're always on, a season of your life where paths just keep crossing, a kind of repeated private access that makes everything feel more personal than maybe it really is. And inside that setting, it can honestly feel undeniable. It can feel like this can't be nothing. There is too much happening here, too many moments, too much pull. And maybe there was something there. But sometimes a part of what that was just the setting itself. Stay with me, y'all. That's the part nobody wants to admit a lot of the time after the fact. It's just like, well, you guys were together, but you kind of had no choice because you were in the same institution for whatever reason, right? And we can think of all the different institutions that could be. Because it feels humiliating. It feels like you're insulting your own feelings, but I don't think that's what it is. I think it's just painful to realize that sometimes the environment is helping create a sense of depth that may not fully exist once the environment is gone. And I think the longer that you're in that environment together, and then things kind of just pop and fizzle away, or one day you just, oh, I'm leaving. I'm going to be over here now. I got to move to this city. Peace. So then what happens? The routine breaks, the setting changes, the easy access disappears. Maybe they're on a different shift. And now you're waiting to see if this connection can stand on its own. And that's when the truth starts to show up. Because if something is only felt alive while the structure was feeding it, then once the structure is gone, one person may feel the loss of the whole thing while the other person just keeps moving. Off script, I remember I had this relationship where I was with somebody and it was because we were always together in the same place. And one day I had to leave. And I just wasn't going to be around. I had to do something else. I was figuring out other things and I was wondering, is this person still going to be around me? And for a while they were, and we were together and everything was great. And then something happened that took their attention away from us, from me, and it's like the person became cold. And I didn't get it. They told me what the focus was, but it just didn't feel like it could just be that, because whatever the situation was, it seemed like it was something that could be worked into our situation. And then you find out sometimes that people don't really want you fully in their life. So personally, I was younger. I ended. I said, I'm done. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what this is, but this isn't what I want to be a part of. I want something real. I want something that has a future. And, I had like countless conversations, maybe 3, 4, 5 conversations. And this person was like a dead fish. I'm just talking, looking at the man in the mirror almost. So then I went about my business, and I think it was about two two or 3 years later, they came back. They saw me somewhere, and they came with all this excitement, saying, I knew that you were going to be back. I felt it in my bones, and whatever. And I think we hung out maybe 2 or 3 more times, and then I was like, you know what? No, I'm going that way, and I know it probably broke their heart, but it was like, okay, well, I was a person sitting there waiting for you all this time, and you were just acting the fool and you wouldn't communicate. So why did you think that I'd be all of a sudden like, what was I supposed to do? And that's maybe a little bit different situation, but that's the type of situation that can happen. I have no idea what happened to them, but just goes to show you that when people are reaching out to you, normal, trying to have a normal conversation with you, they're expressing their feelings to you. You never know. You never know when you're going to be the person trying to crawl back into somebody's life, you know? Now, I have other feelings about that whole situation now that it's, 20 years later, 30 years later, whatever, but it's just kind of interesting, how that works, how sometimes people have like a shell over their eyes. They know how deeply someone is falling for them and you can't see it. You have a connection, but you have the upper hand, I guess. Hit subscribe to You're Probably Right. Real life, real consequences, and real conversations that don't hide behind safe answers. Anyhow, let's get back to this. Just thinking. Anyway, so it happens, the routines break, access disappears. And then when you have to actually deal with the truth of what it really is, Because if something only felt alive while the structure was feeding it, what was it? And once the structure is gone, one person feels the loss of the whole thing while the other person just keeps moving, keeps it pushing, And that's brutal. That's really brutal. I know you probably don't hear it in my voice, but it is really, really brutal. Because from your side, it didn't feel like it was just situational. It felt like it was real. It felt like something had been building. You weren't just attached to, convenience of seeing them. You were attached to the pattern, the meaning, the familiarity, the quiet emotional place they had taken up in your life, the focus you had put on them. You got used to their presence, used to their tone, their attention, their energy, the little shape they made in your world. And it was important to you. It's probably still important to some listening. And then suddenly they're gone or distant, as I was saying in my situation, or unreachable. And you realize maybe some of what felt permanent was actually being held up by circumstance. That can really mess with your head because now you're asking yourself a brutal question. How much of what I felt, of course, was me projecting, but how much, how much of what I felt was about who they are and how much of it was about how often life kept placing them right in front of me? That's not an easy question to sit with, especially when your feelings were sincere, and sincerity makes it harder because sincere people usually don't think in manipulative terms. They think if it feels like consistent, this consistent. Let me say that again. Listen, if it feels this consistent, it must mean something. And that's a very human conclusion. If somebody is in your life all the time, if there's a rhythm between you, if there are these repeated moments of softness or private understandings of course your heart starts building meaning around the whole situation. Of course it does, right? But repeated closeness doesn't always mean the same thing to both people. Maybe you thought it was going to marriage. Maybe you thought it was going to commitment, and maybe they never were committed, and maybe you were totally delusional. Maybe you were blinded by love, as they say, or infatuation, or something else. For one person, it became emotional evidence. For the other person, it may just be familiar. And that is a painful gap. That the distance between those two things right there. Somebody's emotional and the other person, you're familiar. I know you. I bump into you. Because familiarity can feel intimate without actually carrying a future intention. Somebody can get used to you. They can get used to enjoying your presence. They can lean into the atmosphere between you. They can even feel close to you in the moment. But once the setting disappears, they may not feel pulled to rebuilding anything outside of that. And I know it's hard to hear, and I know it probably brings a tear to some people's eyes, especially if it's fresh. And that's when the person who was really attached gets left holding this unbearable confusion. If you're on the other side of this and you're listening, or if you were, you know now. Because you're sitting there thinking, how can something that felt so present vanish this completely? But maybe the harder truth is that what felt self-sustaining was being quietly propped up by routine, access, timing, and repeated contact. Again, that doesn't make it fake, and that's important. It doesn't mean you imagined it, although you probably right now you might be feeling that maybe you did. Maybe you need to go through your phone and really look at, did I really talk to this person? Did we really communicate that much before? It doesn't mean nothing happened. It doesn't mean you were crazy for what you were feeling. It just means some bonds are stronger inside the world that created them than outside of it. And if you were the one who believed the connection had a life beyond the setting, beyond the routine, beyond the convenience, then silence afterward can feel like a kind of betrayal of reality itself. Because you thought the closeness was evidence of something that would be breathing now. The other person was, they maybe they experienced it, but more like a current that, you know, everything was happy and cool while it lasted. That's a hard thing to realize after the fact. Especially because once you do realize it, you start revisiting everything. What was that? What was that? What was that conversation? The repetition, the private moments, the way certain things felt loaded. And you start asking, was I feeling the person, or was I feeling the pattern? Was I attached to them, or to what life kept making possible between us? And honestly, sometimes the answer is both. That's why it hurts so much. And remember, some of us are emotional and some of us aren't, for whatever reason. And it's not clean. It doesn't feel clean. You were attached to a real experience, but the experience may have been more dependent on the circumstances than you know or than you knew. And if the person understood that before you did, while you were still reading the closeness as proof of something deeper, then the whole thing gets even more painful. Because now it's not just that the structure disappeared, It's that they may have known the structure was carrying the whole thing all along, and they still let you keep believing it was building into something more because you were convenient, because you were there, because you were helpful, because you were loving, because you were caring. And that's where proximity turns into illusion. Not because nothing was there, right? Because what was there may not have had its own legs. And the one who falls hardest is usually the one who thought it did. I think this is where a lot of people get quietly destroyed because two people can be in the same connection, having the same conversation, sharing the same moments, feeling some of the same warmth, and still not be in the same way or in there the same way. From the outside, it can look mutual. Even from the inside, it can feel mutual for a long time. And that's what makes this so confusing. It's not usually that one person is completely cold and the other person is completely delusional or delulu, as some would say. That would almost be easier to spot, right? What makes this hard is that there is something real happening. There is warmth, there is comfort, there is ease, there is some kind of bond. The problem is that one person may be giving from the heart while the other person is mostly receiving from the moment. Almost like they need somebody to give into their life. Maybe something happened in their life and they just are looking for a nice, warm, nice, wonderful person. And even though they know that's not their person for the future, they're maybe the person for the moment. And those are not the same thing. Giving from the heart is different. It means you're not just showing up because it feels nice. You're showing up because something in you has actually turned towards them. You're carrying them a little, maybe a lot. Thinking about them, looking out for them, feeling their effects on feeling the effect on you long after the interaction actually ends. You care how they're doing. You care how things land with them. You start becoming more intentional without even fully realizing it. You don't just enjoy them, you start investing in them. And that's deeper. And the dangerous part is the person can absolutely enjoy all of that without meeting you there. They can like warmth, they can like how safe you feel, they can like being understood by you, they can like your care, your consistency, your help, your attention, your softness, the emotional room you make them feel and you have for them. They can take all of that and genuinely appreciate it. They needed it. But appreciation is not the same thing as equal investment. It's not reciprocal. And that's where people get hurt. Because when you're sincere, you naturally assume that if someone is accepting this much of you, if they're leaning into you or leaning into it at least, see the difference? If they keep coming back to it, if they seem to value what's between you, then surely they feel the weight too. No? Maybe not. Or they may feel some of it, but not enough to carry it, or to carry the responsibility of the whole thing. Maybe you're with somebody and they like your personality. Maybe you're just a little bit too fat. Or maybe you're a little bit too old. Or maybe you're a little bit too broke. Or maybe you're a little bit whatever. And that's a huge difference. A person can love what you bring without ever deciding what you actually mean to them. A person can get comfort from your presence without stepping into the seriousness of your attachment. A person can receive your emotional availability, your loyalty, your patience, your care, and never fully ask themselves, am I giving this person something solid back, or am I just enjoying what they make me feel?
Subscribe to You're Probably Right. It's not advice from a pedestal. It's thinking out loud. No 15-second fixes, no model image telling you how to live, just real conversation.
With a real person. Yeah, that's funny. And that's where the mismatch lives. And if you're the one giving from the heart, you often won't see it right away because your sincerity keeps you interpreting things generously. You don't want to cheapen the connection by acting suspicious too early. You don't want to force clarity. You don't want to make things ugly by dragging it into language before it has a chance to naturally become whatever you think it's becoming or whatever you're hoping it's becoming. So you stay open, right? You keep showing up, you keep giving the benefit of the doubt, you keep telling yourself, if this is real, it'll reveal itself. Meanwhile, the other person may be getting exactly what they want from the current arrangement. And that's the part people hate admitting. Sometimes the imbalance lasts because it works really well for the person receiving more than they're actually returning. They get warmth without commitment. That's cheap. They get closeness without responsibility. I can do whatever. They get emotional support without having to hold your heart with the same care you're holding theirs. I get a hug like a baby, cuddled. That doesn't always make them some kind of villain, though. Although you might be feeling that way right now. Sometimes it just makes them comfortable. Comfortable enough not to interrupt an arrangement that benefits them. Comfortable enough to stay vague. Comfortable enough to keep enjoying the connection without forcing themselves to answer what is becoming for you or what it's becoming for you. They always say, right? Why buy the cow if I'm getting the milk for free? Think about it. I mean, unless you're looking to eat steak. And passivity can do a lot of damage. People think harm is only when, something outright outrageous happens, somebody lies outright or some false promise. That's not it. At least then you know what's up, right? But honestly, a lot of damage gets done through quiet acceptance. You accepted it. You let me give it to you, or you gave it to me. I just, through letting someone keep giving while you stay blurry. Through continuing to receive from a person whose feelings are becoming obvious while telling yourself you haven't technically done anything wrong because you never said the big words. But that's too easy, because if you can feel what's happening, if you can sense that this person is getting more attached, more emotionally invested, more inwardly loyal, then your silence is not neutral anymore. And that's what hurts so much later. You start realizing that while you were giving from your heart, they may have just been taking in what the moment gave them. And maybe they needed it. Maybe they really, really needed it. Maybe it was comfort, validation. Maybe it was the steadiness. Maybe it was relief, the attention, the sense of being seen by somebody who was nice and caring. All of it. It may have overwhelmed them. So they leaned in a little bit. Maybe even depended on it at some times, without ever stepping fully into the meaning of what it was for you. That realization can make a person feel sick because you go back over everything and think, so what was that then? What was I giving into? What were they actually doing while I was trying to love them carefully? And the answer might be painful. Maybe you were building something inwardly. Maybe it's like Stevie Wonder. What does he say? Oh, so long for this night I prayed that a star would guide you my way. Something like that, maybe. I don't know. And maybe they were just enjoying being met there without ever planning to build the same thing on your side or on their side. And that's a mismatch. You're bringing heart, they're receiving atmosphere. You're carrying meaning, they're living in the moment. You're slowly becoming more vulnerable. They're staying in the parts that feel good without taking responsibility for where that leaves you. They're staying in parts that just are so important to you and they're just so comfortable, cozy. And again, this is what makes it so hard to get over because it doesn't feel like a clean rejection. It feels like a slow emotional theft. You can't quite prove. Like pieces of you were being accepted the whole time by someone who may never have been standing where you thought they were standing. They might even have developed another connection in the same place, but they realize that that connection can move out from wherever you are. And that can create really specific kinds of humiliation. When you think someone is where you think they are, but they're not. Because afterwards, you don't just feel heartbroken, you feel exposed. You feel foolish. You feel like your sincerity was operating under one set of assumptions while the other person was living their best life. You thought the warmth meant movement. You thought the closeness meant growth. You thought the repeated emotional exchange meant something was slowly becoming real in a shared way. Maybe for them, it was just something nice to step into, something comforting, something flattering, something that made their life feel a little bit better for a while. And if that's true, then the pain is not just they didn't choose me. The pain is I was giving from somewhere sacred and they were mostly receiving from whatever felt good in the moment. They were gone with the wind. Now they're gone with the wind. Flavor of the month and bum of the month club. Literally. Sorry. That's a brutal thing to realize. Because once you see it, you can't really just go back and play innocent. Now you're really, really wondering. You can't keep calling it a mutual thing in the same way. You can't ignore the imbalance anymore. You can't pretend you were both carrying the same emotional weight when one of you was clearly at greater risk the whole time. Maybe it's even over now, and for some reason, whatever you were giving them, you still want to. And you see that as a sickness because they don't deserve it. But then you look and you say, well, there's so many times we are given things that we don't deserve. But when it's breaking your back, that's a whole nother story. And when you consider these things, that's where grief starts changing shape, because it's less about missing them and more about trying to understand why your heart was treating it like something safe to receive, but not serious enough to protect. That's a different kind of heartbreak. That's the kind that stays with people. I mean, if this is the tone you want, you can find many situations like that. But I don't think anybody actually chooses that kind of situation. I think this is where it stops being just sad and starts becoming really hard to carry in reality. Because it's one thing to realize the connection meant more to you than it did to another person. It's another thing to entirely to realize that they may have known it before you, or maybe all along. You might have heard something little like, I know you love me. And you just like, yeah, whatever, buddy. I really like you, but uh, did I? And that's the part that can mess with your head for a long time because, maybe it was a text. Some people like to text, they don't like to have phone calls. So they leave everything on the text. So it's right there for a person just to go back and read. And then it's like, okay, well, what did they mean about this? Like, what did they mean? Why would they say that if they didn't know, right? Because most people don't fully admit what they're feeling right away. That's not how it usually works anyway. Feelings show up in behavior first, in tone, in attention, in consistency, and some people are more attuned to that than others. In the way you start making room for someone without even announcing it to yourself that you're doing it, in how carefully you listen, in how much you listen, in how much their presence starts affecting you, in the way your day changes depending on whether they're near or gone, or warm or distant. It makes your mind wander. Sometimes you can sit there or walk and really just wonder what the heck. You sit to yourself and you say, what were you thinking? Why are you still thinking it? That stuff usually happens before the big internal confession. Before you sit there and really say to yourself, yeah, I'm in deeper than I wanted to be. So while you're still trying to figure out what this even is, the other person may already be seen it already. They may already know you're attached. They may already feel the extra weight in how you show up or how you give. They may already sense that your care is no longer casual. And that's where it gets devastating, because now you're not just dealing with a mismatch, you're dealing with the responsibility that they had a clear read on your heart than you had on your own. Think about it. You were still inside the experience, right? Trying to make sense of it honestly, still trying not to to dramatize it or try to, who are we? What are we? Where's this going? You don't want to say anything. Don't want to jinx it. Maybe it's been a while. Still trying not to overstate it, still trying to tell yourself, maybe I'm reading too much into this. Maybe I just feel close to them. Maybe it's just one of those intense connections that people talk about. Meanwhile, they may have already known exactly what was happening to you. I think, honestly, that's where I've talked about it before. I think that's where a lot of these cop videos come out. Like, I think the bitterness that digs into people. And I think you really, really, really got to try not to allow that to happen to you. And that's why somebody like me, realizing something like that, the best thing I could do is pray and talk to a godly person. And that's for me as a Christian. And then also to realize that there is a reason why they were in my life, and maybe they weren't supposed to be, and maybe I attached myself to the wrong kind of attachment, and here I am, and now what? You know? You see, they may have known you were starting to lean too hard emotionally. They may have known your loyalty was getting deeper. They may have known your vulnerability was widening. They may have known that if this thing collapsed, you were going to be carrying a whole lot more damage than they were. But at least they weren't going to get hurt, right? And they still kept letting you let you play out the whole scenario. And that's the part that's hard to forgive for some people, for most people. Maybe not even like forgive them, but like, you have to forgive. Maybe it's just hard to live with and forget about them because you feel like a fool in oftentimes, right? Because once that possibility gets into your head, you start replaying everything through different lenses, or through at least one different lens. You start thinking, so when I was showing up like that, when I was being that available, that steady, that soft, that loyal, were they seeing all of it? Was I exposed? Did they know what that meant for me? Did they understand what was happening to me while I was still trying to keep it under control? And if the answer is yes, then a whole new kind of pain just pops up. And maybe it brings a tear to your eye. Because now it's not just they didn't feel the same. Maybe it goes back to your childhood where you were always trying to do a little bit more to make people happy, to stay out of trouble. You had to read people and you had to do for people just to stay on level. And you never could really get over the hump. And here you are again as an adult having the same problem. Now they saw me becoming more exposed and they didn't stop the damage. That's heavy. Because people always focus on lying like that's the main way someone hurts you. They focus, oh, he lied. But honestly, sometimes the bigger hurt is when somebody can clearly see your feelings getting deeper and they just let it continue. They don't have to make from fake promises because you're already there making your own on behalf of them. They don't have to tell you huge lies, they just have to stay quiet and be there while continuing to accept whatever it is you're giving. That can do a lot of damage. And I think most people know more than they pretend to know a lot of the time. They know when someone's energy is changed. They know when they matter in a way that's no longer casual. They know when a person is starting to build around them emotionally. They know when someone cares or when their care has crossed into deeper territories. Maybe not perfectly, maybe not with a full map, but enough, usually enough that we know that they know. So when you realize they may have been aware of your feelings before you fully admit them yourself, it creates this awful sense of exposure. Like your heart was visible. Like what felt private inside of yourself maybe wasn't private at all. Maybe other people seen it. Who knows? Like they could read you from the outside while you were still trying to hold yourself together on the inside. That's humiliating. And there's no clean way around it, really, because now you're not only grieving the connection, you're grieving the fact that your vulnerability may have been obvious to someone who didn't care. And that's a terrible feeling when it comes from someone you cared about. It's like a parent who works hard for their kids and works hard and works hard and does this and does that. And the kid gets to teenage years and they totally shun everything that you've taught them. And, you know, it's like they didn't choose to be born by you, but yeah. Anyway, back to what I was saying. You start feeling almost embarrassed by your own tenderness. Like, wow. So I was really out there like that, huh? And they could see it. They knew. And even if they never said anything cruel, even if they never openly mocked it, the silence around that, wow, they could see. And somehow it feels a lot crueler later. Because you think, if you knew I was getting in that deep, why didn't you say something? Why didn't you slow it down? Why didn't you stop taking from a place in me that was clearly getting more serious? Don't mind me, y'all. I'm just getting a little coffee here. Sorry, I need a little coffee. It's an hour now, man. Come on. Okay, listen. Because if you knew I was getting that deep, why didn't you say something? Maybe they did. Why didn't you slow down? Slow it down. Why didn't you stop taking from a place in me that was clearly getting more serious? Like, why wouldn't you? I think I would. And that's the part people often keep private because it feels too, I don't know if I'd say raw, but well, it could be, but maybe embarrassing mostly. You see, it's one thing to say I got hurt. It's another thing to say I think they knew I was falling before I fully knew it myself, and that feeling almost it's almost too naked. Like it's as I said before, you feel exposed. Because hidden inside that sentence is another one. And they still let me keep going. They still let me keep giving. They still let me keep showing up. And that's why this kind of pain can turn into an obsession, where I was saying earlier, maybe you still feel that way. Maybe you still want to give to them. Maybe you still want to do for them. Maybe you still want to take off your $1,000 coat and put it on a puddle so they can walk over it. Maybe you still want to bear more children for this person. Knowing that there's no support coming back. And at this point, they probably tell you that. And you're like, I don't care. It may not be you, but we understand that there's levels to this, right? So I'm trying to touch as many levels as possible. You see, not because you can't let go, right? But because your mind is trying to answer a question it hates living with. You kind of wonder, how aware were they? How much did they know? How long did they know it? Did they see me clearly and say and stay away because it was comfortable for them? Did they know I was becoming emotionally unsafe in something they were never going to fill? So they kind of backed away like Homer Simpson backing away into those bushes. You see, that's the kind of thing that can keep people up at night. Many nights. Because you're not just dealing with loss, right? You're dealing with what feels like an uneven distribution of awareness. They may have had the advantage the whole time. They may have been looking at the connection from a safer distance while you were still inside and deep inside and trying to understand it from the inside. And that's a brutal disadvantage, to be on the wrong side of it. And I think that's why this particular wound lingers the way it does. And that's honestly why I'm spending so much time. And for some, it might seem like I'm just going in circles, but for some, it might be speaking to that pain. It gets into your self respect, you see. It gets into your memory. It gets into how you look back at your own behavior, the things you did. You stop seeing your own kindness as just kindness. You start seeing it as evidence that you were further gone or further gone than you realized. Evidence that they may have known it all along. Evidence that you were emotionally visible in a room where the other person never intended to hold that visibility with the care that it deserved. And that's hard to make peace with, because the real injury isn't just that you were readable. The real injury is that they may have read you correctly and still did nothing to protect you while they were seeing it. And when that finally lands, it can feel like the whole story changes. You thought you were slowly figuring out your feelings, and you realize the other person may have been watching them unfold in real time, like a TV show. They might have talked about it with friends. Have you thought of that? Maybe they talked to their best friend about it. Maybe they didn't. As I said before, guys, this isn't a Disney episode, so I mean, not very many of my episodes are Disney, but I'm trying to let you see everything. I'm trying to bring it home clear, and this might be the episode that might help you. I think this is a part that really breaks people open, not just because it hurts, but because it's humiliating in such a quiet, personal way. It's the moment you start wondering if the other person was awake the whole time while you were dreaming. And I don't mean dreaming in some childish fantasy way. I mean, you were still building meaning around what was happening. You were still letting yourself believe that all the moments and all these moments were pointing somewhere. That closeness was growing into something, that the tension meant something, that the repeated warmth meant something. But the fact that it kept happening, kept deepening, kept pulling you in, and you thought it was leading somewhere real. You were in the experience. You were trying to understand it from the outside, but they may have already known exactly what it was, what it would be, what it ain't. Exactly how far it was going to go, exactly what they were willing to give, exactly where the line was already drawn, exactly what this would never become. And that's the devastating possibility. Because if that's true, then the two of you were not in the same uncertainty together. You weren't two kids trying to figure it out. You know what I mean? You were not slowly discovering the same thing in side by side. It wasn't you and them against the world. It was you in a fishbowl. You were not standing in the same fog together. You were in the fog. They may have been standing outside of it. And that's humiliating because it means while you were interpreting hope, building, trying to make an honest sense of what you felt emotionally charged, and they may have already been operating with a level of clarity that you didn't have and you weren't privy to. They may have already known the limit. They could only go but so far. But I got to marry this person over here. While you were still living in openness. And the funny thing is, sometimes when they peel that back, sometimes some people are still locked in. It's sick. It's sad. It hurts. It's painful. They may have already known the ending while you were still trying to understand the middle. That's hard to sit with because it changes the emotional meaning of everything. Now all those moments you thought you were sharing, discovering, start looking different. The pauses feel different. The closeness looks different. The eye contact looks different. The softness feels different. The things that once felt like evidence now start feeling like places where you may have been carrying more meaning. And once you see that, man, you start wondering if you were the only one treating the connection like it had a future. The other person may have just been living in it like a feel-good situation. And that's horrible. That's horrible to think about. That's horrible to realize. Because hope doesn't usually show up as delusion. It shows up as interpretation. That's what makes it feel so painful, right? You weren't necessarily inventing things from nowhere. You were responding to real moments, real actions, real warmth, real closeness, real repetition, real emotional charge. But hope was filling in all of the blank spaces, so everything seemed just fine. You thought the ambiguity meant possibility. Maybe for them, it meant containment. You thought the inconsistency meant fear and conflict or emotional complexity. He's just a complex man. Maybe for them, it just meant limitations. You thought the connection was an opening. Maybe they already knew it was only ever going to live inside of a certain condition, in a certain area, a certain time, in a certain place. That's what the dream is in that kind of a situation. And you might call yourself stupid, but it's not really being stupid. It's taking something real and imagining that the undefined parts are still alive with possibility. And when you later realize the other person may have known that those things were never going to happen, something cracks. Because now the pain isn't just they didn't choose me, the pain is you let me build a meaning around this that you may have already known the future. And the future was no. That's what gets people replaying everything over and over. They're trying to find the point where there was some kind of a reality split. They're trying to find the moment where the two of them stopped living in the same story, or maybe they never were in the same story. Like one of those alternate ending kind of like choose your own adventure. You were on a love escapade and they were just on an escapade. And then there's the silence. I really think this is where the damage changes shape. Because at first, when somebody pulls back or disappears or just stops reaching out, you can still protect yourself with hope. You can still tell yourself it's temporary. You can still tell yourself they're overwhelmed, confused, stubborn. Maybe they're broken from another relationship. At least that's what they said. Maybe they're scared or whatever. You can still build little you can still have an explanation, right? And that can explain a lot of the stuff that was happening. But then time starts passing. And after a while, silence stops feeling like a pause and it starts feeling like the actual message. That's when it gets a little bit violent inside. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, just violent in the way it lands inside of you. Because every day they don't check in, every day they don't reach back, every day they don't ask how are you? It starts saying something to you whether they mean it or not, if they said anything at all, which at this point they probably didn't. It starts saying, I can leave you here with this. It starts saying, whatever this did to you is not enough to pull me back. It starts saying, I know there was something here, but I'm still willing to let you carry that whole aftermath and you're going to carry it alone. Could have said something, right? And that does something terrible to a person because now you're not just grieving the connection, you're being taught over and over again by absence. The silence starts training your nervous system, it starts pushing into your self worth, it starts making you question the entire scale of what's happening or what happened. You think, how can they be this quiet? If it meant what I thought it meant, and that question starts rotting things from the inside because silence doesn't just withhold comfort, it makes you fill in the blanks yourself. And when you're already hurt, the version you fill in is almost never really kind at that point. You don't usually think, they're silent, but my value is intact. You think, wow, maybe I really didn't matter that much. Or maybe they got what they needed and now they can just leave. Or maybe the whole thing lived in me more than it ever lived in them, and they knew it. And now there's all this silence. And you know what the silence does? It turns your own mind against you. And the worst part is, there's no clean edge to push against. If someone tells you directly, this is over, at least you have something solid, something ugly but concrete. You can grieve the truth of it. You can hate it, it's not me, it's you. You can reject it, collapse over it, but at least the thing has shape. Silence doesn't have shape. It just keeps spreading like a vapor all over and all around and in everything. I was going to say like something, but I won't say it. It gets into the morning. It gets into your phone. It gets into the spaces where you half expected their name to pop up in a message. It gets into your pride. It gets into your routine. It gets into your sense of how real the thing was or wasn't. And because it keeps going, it starts feeling intentional. And even if part of you doesn't want to call it that, that's where a lot of people get stuck because they don't want to believe the silence means what it seems to mean. You're not the one. They keep holding out for some future moment, then the other person will finally reach out and make sense of it. Not necessarily to fix it, just to acknowledge it. To show some sign that they were actually human. At least that's what your mind says. The proof that the whole thing did not just vanish on their side and that you actually mattered as a person. But sometimes that moment never comes. Sorry to tell you. And that's where the real devastation really sits, right? Because now you have to face it. Something that hurts more than the ending itself. They are willing to let the silence do the talking. Remember, mixed messages are not mixed messages. Mixed messages are messages in themselves. They're willing to let you sit there and interpret everything in their absence by yourself. And they are willing to let you carry the confusion by yourself. They are willing to let your self-worth take a hit. They are willing to let the silence become the final shape of your story. And that's brutal. Because of the person left behind, silence doesn't feel neutral. It feels like abandonment with no witness. And if the connection was emotionally deep but undefined, private, layered, and all the more reasons silence hits worse because it's just you. You can't even, maybe you were in a situation where you couldn't even say anything to anybody else because it was embarrassing or it was something you weren't supposed to be in the first place. Because now you're not just missing them, you're being erased in real time from something that felt life-changing and on your side. And that can make somebody act in strange ways, right? You can obsess, you can spiral, you can replay and look at everything. It can make you angry in moments that don't seem connected. It can make you snap at people who don't deserve it. It can make you numb one day and completely wreck the next. because you're not just dealing with loss, you're dealing with this ongoing unanswered thing that just keeps pressing on the same bruise. No call, no check in, no reach, no turnaround, nothing. And after enough time, the silence itself starts to become the answer. And that silence may not explain everything, but it explains enough. It tells you that whatever they understood about your heart, whatever they knew about how deep this was getting for you, it still wasn't enough to move them in a normal response way towards you. And that hits hard because at a certain point, silence stops being an absence of message and it starts to just be a message. And maybe the deepest cut in that message is this: they knew enough to leave you alone with it, and that's what makes it violent. Not just that they're gone, but that they can stay gone while you sit there carrying the emotional wreckage of something they helped create. Bye. Yeah. And then there's something else. And I think I'm going to close with this. I don't think I'm going to go too much farther because it's pretty long so far, guys. I think one of the loneliest parts of this kind of grief sometimes is that so much of it happened in private. And when something lives in a private, maybe you're at school or maybe you're at work and maybe nobody was supposed to know, maybe it was your boss, maybe it was your subordinate. It usually dies in private. And that's a heavy thing to carry because of the connection wasn't fully visible to other people, then the pain afterward isn't fully visible either. Maybe nobody really knew how much it had built up inside of you. Maybe nobody saw the pattern clearly. Maybe from the outside, it just looked like nothing, or maybe you guys hit it very well, or like something casual, or like one of those things that doesn't seem serious enough to even talk about. So nobody saw what you were living in. They didn't see the repetition, they didn't see the little moments, and they didn't see how much meaning you put in to it, how much you gave. They didn't see the emotional tone of it. So when it falls apart, nobody's there. Nobody's there to witness. They're not even there. And I think that matters more than people realize, because when there are witnesses to your pain, even just a few, it helps hold reality in place. Someone can say, "Yeah, I saw that. I was surprised you took it so well. I get why you're hurt. I get why this broke you." There's a kind of relief in that. Not because it fixes anything, maybe somebody's feeling sorry for you a little bit, but because it confirms that you're not making it up and it really happened and somebody saw it. Somebody was like, "Witness," you know? So then, sadly, something like this can make you wonder about your reality and how you see things. Because once something like this happens, right, it doesn't stay contained to that one connection. It starts leaking into the rest of your life when it's that deep. You start questioning your own instincts. You start questioning your perception. You start wondering whether the way you read closeness is actually just broken. You think, did I mistake access for love? Did I mistake attention for care? Did I mistake comfort for commitment? Did I mistake being welcomed for being truly wanted? Did I mistake emotional closeness for something that actually had a future? So now you don't enter future connections cleanly. Now you second guess your own feelings. Now you pull back even when something good might actually be happening. Now one part of you wants closeness and the other part wants to stand aside and say, don't be stupid. Here it goes again. It's just a thought. But you're like, maybe it's not. I can't trust anyone. Maybe it's, I can't let this repeated closeness thing happen. Maybe I can't let too many people in. Maybe I was stupid. Maybe I imagined the whole thing. That's hard. And in closing, listen. I think the hardest truth in all of this is that sometimes the deepest pain is not just that the connection ended. It's not even just that the other person didn't choose you. Sometimes the deepest pain is realizing they may have understood your attachment before you did. They may have seen how much this was becoming for you while you were still trying to find a safe name for it. You want to call it something. They may have known your heart was moving closer, getting softer, getting more loyal, getting more exposed, more invested, while you were there still trying to stay composed and not try to do too much, but you were doing a lot. And they may have known it. That's the part that can really undo someone, right? Because once you realize that, the whole story changed. Now it's not just things didn't work out. Now it's you may have seen, or you may have seen what this was doing to me before I did, and you still let me do it anyway. And that's the kind of pain that sits in somebody for a long time because it doesn't just break the heart, it bruises the dignity, it shakes the trust. It leaves a person wondering how they ended up carrying than so much more of the truth and so much more of the damage at the same time. And maybe that's why this kind of grief feels so private, so hard. It's hard to explain, so hard to let go because you're not only grieving the loss of a person, you're grieving the moment you realize the other person may have been reading the situation all along. And maybe your eyes just open up and they look at you and say, oh, you got it. They saw your warmth. They saw the loyalty. They saw the pull. They saw the hope in your eyes. They saw the vulnerability showing up before you even knew what the heck it was. And then it all fell apart around you. And now you're alone. They knew I was falling before I fully knew it myself, and they still let me hit the ground alone. They played me like a violin. Could you imagine a violinist playing a violin, and they're playing it? Maybe they had other violins at home and they played it, and then they kind of just finished the song and just let the violin kind of fall out of their hands and hit the ground. And they just stepped over it and walked away. They didn't even turn around to see how cracked it was. They just said, I have 3 more. Maybe that violin is you. Because it's not just heartbreak. It's heartbreak mixed with humiliation, heartbreak mixed with exposure, heartbreak mixed with the realization that somebody stood close enough to feel what was happening to you and did not meet you there. They just let you have it. And if that is what you've been carrying, if that's the private prison you've been living in, if that's why you've been acting strange, feeling unlike yourself, feeling ashamed and of how much it still affects you, then maybe the first step is just telling the truth about what happened and how hurt you are. Not the edited version, right? Not the polite version, just the real version of what really happened. What hurt was not only that they left. What hurt was they may have known what was going on the whole time. And that's real. And I think once you name it clearly of what it actually was, I think it can start a sort of shift in your life. And not because it fixes it, because it doesn't. Not because it suddenly stops hurting, because it might not necessarily, and depending on whether or not you have found any other new connections or found somebody that is going to be your somebody. Now, I don't know. Sometimes people are still in pain and they're not able to give what they need to give to a new or a husband or a wife because of the connection. But I think sitting with the reality of what happens is a big thing. It can really help you move forward. Sometimes being honest about the exact shape of the pain and could be the very first step in trying to move past, owning your whole inner life and everything that happened to you, Anyhow, maybe that's where I leave this, y'all. Not with some clean lesson, not with some easy recovery arc, or do these 4 things and you'll be perfect. Sometimes the deepest pain is not being unloved. It's discovering that the other person understood what you were going through and what you were becoming, and what you were striving for, and they let you take whatever was coming to you. And if that's grief, I could say for sure, most likely for most of us, then at least call it by its name. You're still grieving. Because maybe that's how you stop caring. You stop carrying the secret in your body. Not that I'm saying you need to shout it from the mountaintops. And maybe that's how you finally start finding your way out of this prison. Anyhow, y'all, that is episode 321. And if this felt a little bit too familiar, yeah, you're probably right. Anyhow, till next time, y'all. Remember, follow, subscribe wherever you can. Check out my YouTube shorts. And keep listening. And I'll keep doing this as long as it takes. Until next time, y'all. Peace out. MC, I'm out. Hey, come check out You Probably Right podcast. Society is getting more unpredictable every day, but at the same time, predictable in its unpredictability. Say that 4 times real fast. Come with me as I attempt to find clarity in all the fog while staying way outside the box and kicking the box way down the road with my size 12 ducks. I use the Bible, experience, education, fortune, misfortune, life's lessons, life's mistakes to sort through all the mess. I talk about news, God, God, self-help, sports, sickness, health, music, parenting, love, humbleness, hurt, pain, joy, and all the things that might make you say, I never thought of it that way. Hopefully, anyway. Also, I take a stab at answering tough and not so tough questions, and all the while understand that, listen, sometimes you end up in the hot seat and there's no thermostat. Well, that's how it is here. And because there's no topic, very few topics off the table, Torontonians will understand that Doug Ford reference there. Hopefully the podcast will be helpful and uplifting. And hey, maybe you'll find your own private Idaho here somewhere. Hope to see you soon.
Getting late and I'm still wide awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the space you take. One day you're here, next day you're gone, and I'm just trying to understand where we went wrong. You only love me in the middle of the night. Then you fade away with the morning light. I need to know, is this for real? Tell me how you truly feel. Oh, yeah. I give my all, you give me half your heart. You say the words, but we just stay so far apart. These mixed signals are tearing me down, lost in the silence when you're not around. Tell me how you feel. How you really feel. Is any of this real? Just tell me, yeah. Tell me, baby. Oh. You only love me in the middle of the night. Then you fade away with the morning light. I need to know, is this for real? Tell me how you truly feel. Oh, yeah.